starting this demo. My name is AJ Alper. I do a live demo every Tuesday night. If this is the first time that you're joining in, I, yep, sorry. Oh, I'm always learning here, technical difficulties. Yeah, I have the video up on my screen so I can see your comments too, but I forgot to put the sound down. Anyway, so I'll be starting here just in a minute. I just wouldn't mind if one or two more people join us. If you can, write a quick note. Let me know where you're watching from, and I would appreciate that. If you have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer them as I paint. Anyway, tonight's painting is how do I flip this around? There you go. This is a photo of a young woman named Vanessa. I got her photo off of the app Sketchy. It's a great place to get resource images, and I am just going to jump in right now and get started. Oh, hi Randy, how are you doing? From Arlington, Washington. Great. I'm I'm in Baltimore, so we're not too far apart there. And let me get a nice big brush to start with. This photo is a little bit cropped right at her forehead, but sometimes that makes for an interesting painting. And I just start with getting some landmarks measured. Let me just make sure this is scrolled all the way up. Yep. So just putting in a few marks. Helps if I put a little bit of paint out on the palette. Okay, almost doesn't matter what color I start with. Sometimes I'll do a gray, sometimes I'll do a little bit of a flesh tone just to do the underdrawing. But you don't want the color to compete too much with the colors that you're going to be putting down later. That's right here. And let's get a point of her chin. Somewhere around there. Okay, that's about right. So it's a little bit of an illusion, but her head looks much smaller in the drawing because I'm just seeing really the outline of her face, not her hair or ear. Do need to come out just a little bit wider though. There, that looks a little bit better. Oh, Washington State. Oh, that makes more sense. Um, Not Washington, D.C. I bet a lot of people get confused over that one. Not, not Arlington, just outside of D.C. See the nostril a little bit higher. And from Panama, great. I think when I make the announcements now for the time, I'm going to put in a bunch of cities around the world with the time in whatever time zone those are, so that I know it's a little confusing when I say 9 p.m. Eastern time. A lot of people don't know what Eastern time is if they're used to dealing with Greenwich Mean Time. I had one person ask me if they missed it already. They were in New Zealand and it was already the next day. So even though I hadn't started yet, so it's just a little bit of a mind bender when you're talking to someone that's already in tomorrow when you're going to be doing something that hasn't happened yet the day before. So a little bit like Back to the Future there. Okay, I'm gonna need to scroll up to see a little bit more of her. Just if anyone can, let me know if they can hear all right. I should be okay because I now have a microphone that I use. It's actually part of a headset. Before I used to try to talk into my phone and the sound was terrible. Okay, and moving right along, let's get her ear placed, and then I can sort of do a little bit better job drawing around the mouth and the nose. Eyebrow comes down here, and then the ear. Oh, well, I gave her a crazy eyebrow. It actually probably stops around there. Looks like. Hold on. Yep. The top of the eyebrow is actually way up here, so I have to draw that. This is where I have to come in with a little bit of white and color to correct what I put down so that I don't get confused. I'm just going to get a little bit of a gray going in here for the eyebrow. Okay, that's because I have ADHD. I like to get right into the painting. I don't have the patience for all the drawing. So, and for me too, the sooner that I can start to see something and visualize it, the better that I get at being able to compare it to the photo to see where things are on or off. I'm just putting in, and while I remember, I'm just going to put in a little bit of the eye color, the color of the white of the eye, just to get it in there. It gets really hard to paint later on um, when you're trying to get it with a small brush into the little space. So if I can just sort of get it in there. And I'm going to be trying to be much more efficient with my brush strokes tonight. I spend a lot of time going back and forth with smaller strokes, and I think what I need to do is spend much more time getting the general um, brush strokes and shapes right, and then from there just start to get a little bit more into the details, but much slower. Okay, that's got to be redder in here. She's got a little bit of like purple going on underneath her eye, but I went too blue, so now I'm overcompensating with some red. So you can see how I'm using very broad strokes now just to kind of get the feeling of it. She's got this passage of light pink coming through her cheek here, and that just comes right into her mouth and then sort of swoops up. So that's going to help me as long as I remember to remeasure, and that whatever I put down as a nostril was completely in the wrong place. So just going to start to redraw that. So I got the landmark of the corner of the eye there. Yep, that's in the right place. And then if I look at the placement of the nostrils, sort of at an angle here, let's get a little more black on there. Okay, and so that tells me the line I have for my nose is pretty far off, so I'm just going to obliterate that. Seth asks, how do I feel about using a different medium to start the drawing off, like watercolor? Well, you wouldn't be able to use watercolor, but you could use something. Well, yeah, you could use something like watercolor or acrylic as long as it's completely dry, and actually more acrylic. The problem with watercolor is that it's sort of chalky and would start to, even if it's completely dry, the oil paints would start to pick it up a little bit. I'm not sure if that's really where I want to go though. I'm more about doing a wet into wet technique. So the drawing is just kind of a way to kind of get me started in the right direction, and then I want to get right into painting. And so I know a lot of artists that use charcoal, especially vine charcoal, that just sort of can be brushed off easily. And so if they want to correct the drawing, all they have to do is just give it a quick wipe, and most of the marks come off. And but then you can have enough marks there to see where all your landmarks are. So I even want to put in little bits of light, like the highlight on her nose. I can look at where it is in relationship to this eye here. I want to move that eye just up a tad, and then also get a quick measurement of that. I'm just really, I don't know why I'm working very quickly tonight, and that's just sort of the mood that I'm in. I want it to feel very sketchy, not sketchy in a negative way, sketchy in a, you know what I mean. Come on, you know what I'm talking. I'm saying sketchy like loose, okay, not like weird or creepy or something like that. Okay, fix her forehead, and Samurai says looking dope. I think that's probably a compliment. An old guy like me, I don't know all the slang words, so sometimes dope, maybe that could be something bad. I'm not sure. But yeah, I get it. Okay. So I have her eye sliding out a little bit that way, or at least that's the way it's appearing. So I want to make sure that I'm getting it in the right place. So yeah, I can get a little of that bluish color for the white of her eye and just move it back a little bit this way. And even if things are like a little bit blurry, soft edge, that's fine. Um, Eventually, I do want to get a contrast between some hard edges and soft edges. So having quite a few bits of soft edges already in the painting is kind of useful because it's a thing for me to get later on in the painting as I start to tighten up. Okay, just want to start to get the idea of her nose in here. Top of the nostril. It's just what I thought would be just a tad lower. I'm using a pretty big brush tonight. This is a partially worn, partially used, um, flat. I'm just trying to look for the number, the size of it, but it looks like a number 10. Uh, I think 10 flat. It's pretty big, and I can't do a lot with detail except that I can use the edge of the brush to have a little bit more control. But it's a nice brush if you want to keep a painting loose. It keeps you from getting too picky, even though I'm being a little picky around this nostril. Okay, then Seth. Okay, let me see. We I've skipped a few comments here. Sound is good. Yes, it is. I love the color light blue on the eye, although I probably obliterated that one already. That was Samurai. Um, Let me see. When you were talking about brushing, that was Sargent's main idea, was economy of means. Is that what you're talking about? Yes. Really, I want to try to say as much with as few strokes as possible especially at first. Then later I can decide to tighten up quite a bit. Um, yes, it's looking awesome means dope. Okay, yes, I think I was just joking. Um, Isabel from the Netherlands. Hi, welcome, Seth. I'm also in wet. Um, I'm also into wet, but I get super overwhelmed drawing with the oil paint in the beginning. How will you deal with moving edges like upper ridge of the nose touching her eyebrow? Um, so I think I just have gotten really good at manipulating the paint that's already on the canvas. If there's too much, and in my case it's a panel and it has a bit of tooth in it, but if there's just too much paint, you can always just try, just with a paper towel or with a dry brush, take some off. Um, but if you when you're working and you put down a color that's on top of an area that already has a bit of color, you just kind of calculate where it is that you want to end up, and you you sort of do a little bit of math in your head. The color on your brush plus the color that's already on the panel equals some color that's somewhere in between. If you know you really need to get much lighter or much darker, you can just come in with the pure um, black or pure transparent color to get it darker, or you can come in with some pure white to get it lighter. And then if you lose too much color in that process, then you can come back in with a little bit um, of strong color on top of that. So you're kind of doing three or four passes, just trying to mix the right color onto the panel. Um, it's really hard for me to explain the kind of color mixing that I do because uh, and you can see me mixing. I'm just have pools of paint that I just keep on adding bits of color into. I'm looking at this area right now, so I have this pinkish area. I can see there's a little bit of orange in there. Oh, I can see I wanted to go a little bit lighter, so then I'm adding white. And by the time I'm done, then I'm pretty close to that color that I want. And then I can see, oh, well, it needs to be adjusted a little bit lighter, and there's a little bit of purple in here, so that's pretty close to what I want. And then I just go like that. So this area right here is not too bad to begin with. I can look around the eye and see I'm not getting that kind of smoky orange smokiness around her eye, so I'm mixing a little bit of pink, orange, and then I'm just going to throw in a little bit of black in there. My black is chromium black, which is a mixture of phthalo green and quinacridone red. It's not a true black like lamp black, but it's two complementary transparent colors mixed together, which gives a nice almost black mixture. Well, it looks black, and that way you're not it's kind of more of an impressionist idea. I'm just as happy to use a ivory black or something like that. The problem with ivory black is it tends to shift the hue of the color a little bit too much, has a little bit too much influence in the color. Okay, so I'm just looking at kind of abstractly just patches of color that I see on there, and I'm trying to compare um, placement and shape that I have, and at the same time trying to think about this as a three-dimensional object, not just the 2D, but all the time thinking about the 3D also, whether something is moving forward or backwards in space, and how my values and the shape of my brush strokes and the colors work to try to create that illusion. So just thinking about all those things as I go, and it's a bit of a, sort of like playing a complicated piece of music where you have to think about a whole bunch of different things at the same time: the position of your hands, the tempo of the music, etc. And let me see if I can get a little bit more um, indication of the shapes around the nose so that we can start to read that. And then I have this sort of darkish orange shadow alongside her nose. And, I'm just taking a wild stab of it about how dark to go, the right color. If it's wrong, I can just totally adjust it later, but trying to be kind of spot on as much as I can so that I don't have to do too much repainting. That's just a little bit too much on the light side, so it can come in a little bit darker. Just get a little bit of black in there. It's not gonna hurt you. Okay, so some of these things are starting to appear a little bit. Got this little bit of light that's bouncing around right here. Then I'm going to get quite a bit of black on the brush so that I can start to carve the edge of her face. Get a little bit of idea of the shape of her face and the values that are going on there. Okay, does a larger brush help? Um, a larger brush is like um, let's just say a small brush can be a crutch, and a large brush most painters are a little bit afraid of because it is wielding kind of a large instrument to do sometimes some very fine and precise things. But I really find that the painting is more aesthetically pleasing. You can see the brushwork more readily, and you can move through the painting much more quickly if you can just get a lot of paint on the brush and just make large brush strokes. Imagine me trying to do that with a tiny little brush. And so now that I have that shadow in there, then, or that it's actually her hair, but there's some shadow cast on her hair even, then I can start to see where things are. Got the back of her neck. And maybe it came in a little bit too much. It's a good point to try to measure. Yep, so actually not too far off. I am just going to make a whole load of fleshy gray color to put in her neck. And I'm going to look real quick. If I'm looking at the relationship of the values between the neck and her face, the neck is just a step darker, um, but I can also start to exaggerate that so that her face does come forward a little bit. Just again, I'm just taking a wild stab at the color here and the values. So that black little bit of shadow is not going to work. It needs to be a little bit greener or something, just and more subtle. Yep, that's a lot closer. And then I can see there's a little bit of lighter color here. Her neck is really has a lot of gray in it compared to her face, so I want to make sure that I don't put too much color in there, that it's really starting to cool off, in a sense, cool off the color, cool off the warmth, so it's starting to get grayer. And then this area, her collarbone is just creating the little bit of this contour there. Okay, so need to give her a little more neck, and that actually works well to help give the idea that it's turning back in space, getting a little bit of the dark in there from where I misdrew the line. So that was as Bob Ross would say, is a happy little accident. And just going to put in that sort of little bit of pinkness from her cheeks there, and then a slightly lighter grayer color of her jaw. Just really moving quickly here. There's going to be a little bit of a green around the mouth. And then I have that shadow, which has a bit of red in it. So getting a little bit of the alizarin permanent there. and have to correct the angle of her mouth. I did have it, the far end of her mouth down a little bit too far. Okay, and just correct that nostril a little bit, just make it a little shallower. So I'm just, as I'm working, I'm just going and correcting things. It's not, if you know you can easily change things and move them around, then you start to lose that fear of just kind of attacking, just kind of taking chances with the painting. I know a lot of people will get very tentative. It's like, oh well, I'm gonna mess it up, and it's like, no, you just kind of you go for it. You go for it, and the ability to move things around or correct things also makes for a better painting, because then you don't have to live with something that's in the wrong place. You can adjust the forms so that the anatomy looks right. Okay, I'm running out of white here, so it's the color that I start to run out of first. Okay, where did I put that white? I have this big bag of paints. All my colors are Gamblin colors. I use Gamblin Artist Oils, which is their top grade oil paint. I've just switched to Radiant White. I was using Titanium White, and I may switch back to Titanium White. I see very little difference between the two colors. There is a bit more brightness to the Radiant White by the time I've mucked it up with my dirty solvent and other colors on the palette. It really doesn't make that much difference. But titanium white and radiant white are actually, they have the same pigments in them, but the difference is that one has linseed oil and the other has safflower oil as the binder, and the um, the radiant white has the linseed oil, which doesn't have any yellowing in it, or less yellowing, so it just looks a bit brighter. Okay, so yes, yeah, so Samurai says, yes, it used to happen to me. I didn't want to get it wrong, but then you realize you aren't drawing. Um, so, my Mayra Flores. My name is pronounced like Mayara. Okay. People always ask, laugh out loud. Hey, from Brazil. Um, Great, welcome. I just started using oils, and your work inspired me to be experimental. Thanks for sharing. Well, you're welcome, and thanks for joining us. I love the fact that we have someone here from Brazil, and someone else from Washington, and someone else from Panama, and just all over the world here. Unfortunately, there's not going to be as many people from the Middle East or Europe, just because of the time zones. And that's the other day I did a morning, it was 1 o'clock in the afternoon, but um, as early as I could do it, so that some people that are in that area of the world, um, they could watch a little bit and not have it be the middle of the night. Okay, so just want to start to see some of these shapes and forms come around. And part of how I am creating the sense of form is by hard and soft edges, and then the other mostly is by changes of value. So if you have even just the subtlest change of value, you can really get the eye to understand something is turning towards you or turning away from you, and you can really create quite a sense of form. Okay, again, I need to reinforce that shadow. That's I have to go a little bit darker there along the edge of her nose, and then that just comes goes almost to black. And I may get a little bit of medium in here just to get those darks a little punchier. And let me get a little bit of the something slightly blue-gray for the area of her eye. Again, this is a really big brush for trying to paint in little areas, but I'm just can use the edge of the corner, and then I can carve back again. So you can actually get a fair amount of detail with a large brush, especially if you paint in passes, like you put down one large stroke and then you overlap it just slightly with another large stroke, and what ends up is you can leave a fairly thin line with the large brush in that way. So right now I can put in black here, and then I can come back and put color above it. Gotta get enough color on the brush. I can put color above it, and then what I can do is end up leaving just pretty much a thin line there. As long as I have it in the right place, um, that would be good. If I don't, then I just do it. I can do it again later. Okay, so I can see I have the cheek coming out way too far here. So either I have my cheek off or my face, the rest of my face off, measurement off, I should say. And so that is the case, that I just have too much cheek there. So I'm going to come in and correct that. And I do need to get, has a little bit of purple and red in it, her her chin. Make sure I get it the right line here. Okay. So let me get the hair on the other side of her face, and that will really help me start to see the form a little bit better. So if I look from the top corner of this eye, moving down here, the ear comes up, and the hair comes in and cuts a pretty sharp line at the bottom of the ear. And I want to see what the line is of the ear. The very bottom of the ear comes right near the top of the nostril, so that's pretty close. Let's um, I'm going to have to come in with a little bit smaller brush there to emphasize that shape of the nostril. That's around here is going to really be my focal point, so I do want to kind of nail that area where the whole rest of the face can be somewhat soft if I want, and it will still read well. So coming in pretty wet in the hair here. Probably do want to have a little bit less solvent there. And if I really want to get dark darks, then I have to make sure I don't get a whole lot of white in the paint. The white can really cause sort of like fogging up, and then it makes it really hard to get that really rich dark. And then a whole lot more black here. So flesh tones, my flesh tones have a habit of becoming quite gray, especially when painting such light skin. How do you prevent the gray skin? So there's going to be areas of the skin where it's just going to be white and another color, like um, a pure red, like naphthol red in my case, or quinacridone red. And if you're going very light, you just really want those two colors, because the white is going to gray your color quite a bit. So the minute that you start to get second and third colors in there, then it's really going to start to go gray, especially if you have any black or gray from your solvent in the, if I look at my solvent right now, it kind of looks like coffee, and that will start affecting the quality of your color. So at some point you just have to be working very cleanly to make sure that those colors don't get too gray if you really want it. I have a habit of having too much. Sometimes I lean really hard on the color, and I get areas of too much color where I do need it to be much grayer. And if I really want a sense of realism, there really needs to be quite a bit more gray to balance out the color that I have down. Otherwise, it does start to look a little bit cartoony if you go too bright with all the colors. And I think my work tends to just be right on that edge where um, it has a lot of color, and if I went any brighter, added more color, then I'm running the risk of losing that sense of realism. Let's see, let's get this shape working in here a little bit better. Okay, let me see. And Mayara says, these subtle changes of values always get me. It will take me a while, but I hope to be able to see it more clearly with time. I'm down to photo references with natural soft light, which doesn't help. Um, I'm sorry, I'm drawn to. I get it. I'm drawn to photo references. Yeah, so you look at a photo and it has all these soft, very soft changes in flesh tones. The light side of the face will be almost overexposed, so it's just a very light flesh tone and very light flesh tone. And yes, then it gets very hard. If you already have a hard time controlling your values, starting off with a reference that requires that you control the values really well, then that's going to be difficult. I have difficulty with that, and in fact, I'm just about to start a commission this week. We'll see if it comes through, but if so, the photo it's of a young child, 4 month old, and the photography is very light and the flesh tones are very light, and I know that that's going to be the hard part for me is getting those very getting the transitions with the very light and faint changes of flesh tone. It's going to be a real workout. And then again, it's going to be that kind of thing where I'm going to have to make sure that my paint is very clean to make sure where there's those hints of color that I'm able to get them, even though the the paint will almost get very close to white and still have to hold on to some color. There is colors like the quinacridone red that have such a high tinting strength that you're able to hold on to a fair amount of color even there's when your paint is almost completely just white and just a hair of the quinacridone red. So having colors with extremely high tinting strengths is very useful. It allows me to be able to get some things that I can see in the photograph and normally I wouldn't be able to achieve with paint, um, and with some of those paints I'm still able to pull out some color. You just get some bluish greenish color in the shirt here. I think I may want to push, here's somewhere where I might want to push a little more color. I think that's about too much, just to make sure that I see color in here. Now you can hear how scratchy the surface of the panel is. Sorry, I'm really having a hard time speaking tonight. It's my brain. Whenever I get into stuff that's very visual, I have a hard time digging out those words as quickly as I want to. And then on top of it, I'm doing a live demo, so no no post-production editing there. Okay, so like samurai. I hope I'm really. I think I said samurai a few times. Um, samurai. Who do you think is a great painter that we can also learn some from him or her? Um, that's if you're looking for someone who's historical. I mean that they're from the past. I would I would urge you to look at the paintings of Sargent, John Singer Sargent. Joaquin Sorolla is also a great Spanish impressionist, and Anders Zorn, who's a Norwegian painter. They're all from the end of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th century. Um, Contemporary painters that I like, I think that Jeremy Lipking is awesome painter. Casey Baugh does a lot of interesting work, and um, is now working, I think, a lot in charcoal and in a much larger scale. So that sort of takes it out of this genre of painting a little bit when you work on panels and canvases that are so huge. And I like a lot the work of Malcolm Lipke. I've been ever since I was an art student. I've been looking at his work and admiring um, his his use of different color keys, so that he can make a green flesh tone look warm by how he uses color. So it's very interesting, and he also is very referential to the great Russian and European painters of the past. So I've heard him speak before, and he says he looks a lot at Repin and some of the other Russian painters as an influence. He's not really copying their work, but he's also looking to see how they're handling color and the brushwork, etc. So I want to get the fulcrum in here, or some indication of it, which is that little groove shape that's underneath the nose. And there's going to be a hit of light, which has a little bit of yellow or orange with white. Okay, something like that. Just want to be very loose still. Don't want to, like I said, I want to be economical, but I also um, don't want to have to try to be so exact and fiddly with the paint. Just want to use the large brush for what it's good for right now, and sort of let the paint be the paint. Let the mistakes be the mistakes. Let them sit there for a while. They may turn out to be more interesting. Okay, really want to get the shape of this nostril though, and I need a smaller brush if I'm going to try to keep it clean. So where is that? Let me try this brush. Nope. I need to go brush shopping because I have a lot of beat up brushes. I think this one will do it. This is I think it's a round. It no longer has any shape, but just going to try to do as much as I can in a couple strokes. Okay. And there's a little bit of orange red coming off the back end of the nostril there. Okay. Let's try to keep it like that. Now the risk here, now that I picked up the smaller brush, is that I want to do a lot of things with it. As long as I can manage to keep it loose, then then I don't have to put it down. But the minute I start doing little dibs and dabs, then I have to give it up. Okay, that isn't so bad. So let's clarify this light shape here, and let's get a little bit of the eyebrow going. Would you ever use Prussian blue in blacks? Yeah, sure. I don't have Prussian blue in my palette. What I do have is phthalo blue, which is a similar color. A little bit of ultramarine blue and your phthalo blue, and you get something that's a pretty close match to Prussian blue. It's just, it sits there somewhere in the middle a little bit. And I've just, ever since art school, I've been using phthalo blue. It's one of those nice modern colors that have that huge, huge uh, tinting strength, which allows you to do so much with it. Okay, do you see what I was doing? Like using 4 or 5 strokes instead of the one that I would use with the larger brush. So I'm gonna have to give this puppy up soon. And let's get this iris a little bit more exact. Can throw in some of the darks here. Just gonna be brave and go for it. Top of the iris there, then it comes down. So I like that calligraphic kind of mark, um, in paintings. Something that you see Sargent do, or Whistler, or William Merritt Chase, and something that you would see in Velázquez paintings too, where you you see it when you're close up to the painting. It's just one broad brushstroke or one thin brushstroke. You can see it wasn't a bunch of little fiddly strokes. It was just the artist just really taking the brush and making the mark, and you can see it. You can see the brushstroke, but then when you step back, then it dissolves and becomes uh, a perfect element in the painting. You can't even see it anymore. So that's, when it's done right, it's just the most amazing thing in the world. So I have a light here on the edge of the nose. It's just in the wrong place. It's throwing everything off. So, okay, back to the big brush. So yeah, so Myara says, wait, I have to back up a little bit. Prussian blue. Thanks for the tips and sorry about the English mistakes. Ha ha ha. No problem. No problem here. Myra also says, I don't know if you know him, but Andrew Kadima has some awesome work too. He also has a channel here on YouTube. His techniques are hypnotizing. I was through his videos that I found yours, AJ. Oh, it was through his videos I found yours. Yeah, so I he does a lot of time lapse videos. I don't know if he has that many tutorials, but I think that from what I've seen, it's mostly time lapse, and those are really fun to watch. And he seems to be doing 1 or 2, maybe a week. I also, especially some of these demos, I'll put them into time lapse videos also and repost them. I just found that not a lot of people are watching them. Um, my time lapses, I maybe I don't have a big enough channel and following or subscribers yet to really get a lot of watch time on those. I find that my tutorials and my demos that are much more explanatory of my process, I get a lot more watch time. So I try not, I'm tending not to do quite as many um, of those just straight, um, I can't even talk, those straight time lapse videos. They are hypnotizing, and I have been putting more of them on an IGTV where the the attention span is much shorter. So partially what I'm looking at is I'm trying to pick out sort of the shapes of values and color that I can kind of map out, and lead the viewer around the the face, the contours of the face, so that then I start to get some of the dimensionality of the face through that. Need to go a little bit yellow, orange, greener here in the. I'm looking at the color in the hollow of the cheek here. I get some of the hairs that come down here, and then just maybe it's a little redder. Nope, that's not the right color. Not even close. Okay, I think this is it. Yep, that's better. Just go a couple steps lighter, and I've got it. Okay, so that's the color there. It's just very subtle. And that's one of the hard things. It's taken me a long time to learn is that when you can pick out a color and value change, sometimes it's just so subtle you can really barely see it, but then it's then really difficult to get yourself to put it down on the canvas or panel as subtle as it is, because it's hard to believe that someone is going to notice it. And then what I find is if you can really control and get sort of that same level of subtlety that is there in the photo reference, then it really does start to read correctly. Like I said, it's amazing how so little change in value, and you can totally get so much out of it. Just as long as it's well placed, and I don't know if are you guys experiencing, are you getting a little bit of a blurriness in the broadcast? Because when I look up on my screen, it's maybe I'm just having poor Wi-Fi, or yeah, poor Wi-Fi on my end. So it's hurting it. If you guys are having any problems with the picture, let me know. Um, yeah. So yeah. Sorry for Mayara. Yeah, for me, I find the tutorials and time lapses. I go for the tutorials first anyway. I guess time lapses get more views on channels that only post time lapses. Well, yeah, maybe that's true. I have some older time lapses that have quite a few views, but my most watched um, video so far, besides the demos, which just naturally get a lot of watch time because they're so long, is a tutorial that I did um, about 7 or 8 months ago, and it has about, I know for some channels it doesn't sound very much. For me, it's a lot. It's now gotten 4,000 views, and it's just because it. Excuse me. Gotta hit the water. Hold on. So it picks up like maybe 50 views a week. So that one just keeps on getting um, placed more and more as a suggested video, and more people watch it. And it's really not too different than some of my other tutorials. Sometimes it's hard to figure out for me, like, why does that one get suggested so much and some of the others not as much? And maybe just because it started off, it got well placed, and a lot of people watched it initially, and so now it just has more juju that that YouTube um, places it more often, and so thus it gets more and more watch time. But I at some point I stopped doing as many tutorials. They were just taking up a lot of my painting time to do the video production, so I decided to do these live demos instead. And at some point I'll get back to making more tutorials. They are fun to make. They just take a lot of time, and I have a full-time job, and my goal and my free time is to do as much painting as I can. So not making as many videos as I can. So it was becoming little bit of a conflict. So I'm really knocking back. I'm putting quite a bit of the same color paint now in the area of her cheek, because there was just too much contrast going on there. And this is one of those things like I have to pay attention to the subtlety that's in the reference. This a little bit of a gray edge here that comes up along the edge of her jaw where there's the darker shadow. And that shadow is a little bit redder than what I have it. And she's missing quite a bit of chin, so, but that's okay. I can eventually work up to it. That that helps. And then there's some reddish, darkish shadow along this edge of her mouth. Again, I'm using this smaller brush, so at some point I'm going to have to give it up. Okay, so now this is where I can start to do a lot of adjustments, comparisons. This is where I can start to move through the painting process pretty quickly to, as long as I start really making the adjustments to the things that are the most off, that I can really make quite a bit of progress. And then at some point I just have to buckle down and just really look, observe, not do as much painting, but just really keep on looking until I can see where I really need to make some very subtle changes. Okay, just getting a little quiet here, sorry. Um, yeah, it just started getting blurry. Demos are awesome. Thanks again for sharing your process. It brings the community closer together. Oh, well, great. Thank you. And I just want to remind you guys, if any of you out there are watching and you haven't subscribed to my channel, please do. You'll get notified if you hit that little bell icon. You'll get notified for every video that I post. If you just want to get occasionally notified, then just subscribe. And but that also helps me because it means that when I post something, a lot of people know it right away. It gets quite a bit of watch time initially, and then it gets shared out to more people, sort of how the algorithm works. And so getting that subscriber count up really does help me. So right now, think through the direction of the different planes on the face. So this bit of lip points out this way. Then there's the cheek that comes down and it's pointing just in the opposite direction. And then there's a little bit of a turn to her cheek here. And then that softens out quickly with that little bit of pink in her cheeks that's just a tad lighter. Let's see if I can, don't have enough white in my paint there, but yeah, so got to get a much more paint going, much more white paint going, I should say. Okay, I think I got it now. Let me see. Yep, that might be too light, but it's very close. And then some little bit of darker orange along the edge here. Okay, I can keep this smaller brush just as long as I'm doing longer expressive brush strokes. Gives me a little bit of control that I can lash the paint on. Gotta remember to paint along the contour, so it really gives you a more sense of flow and rhythm. And some interesting shapes here along the side of the nose. Let's see if I can pull some of this together a little bit better. So looking at the top here, there's a lot of greens, grays and greens in there, and I have just the color on my palette for that. It's a mixture of orange, black, green, and yellow. And then very soft transition more into an orange. That's not a soft transition. Actually, it's more reddish right up here. Top line of her nose is a little straighter. And then she has more of a little more roundness to the tip of her nose. So came in a little bit too light there. So just slowing it down. Okay. And then I want to get that top edge of her nostril just a little bit lower along that highlight. So I'm carving into that highlight a little bit. So, and you can see I'm not having any difficulty getting the color that I want where I want it. And that's just really practice mixing color, practice seeing color, and and then pay attention to the relationship of all these shapes and placement of everything to every other bit of placement, like some giant jigsaw puzzle. And then paying attention to the anatomy, whether it's really looking right, having the right expression, the right distance and proportions. Okay, so I can see her eyebrow comes down a little bit quicker there. And then the other side comes down a little quicker too. Gave her a little bit too much brow. Then I have, if you look, this shape in here is very round, and the makeup is kind of interfering with our understanding of that, or being able to paint it as round it is. I just really have to focus and make sure that I keep on softening that area and have the colors around it the right value so that it starts to feel round like that. And then I have to get that hit of white highlight there right at the top here, which will really help with that. And then even I'm not really getting that quite that orange smokiness around the eyes quite yet. I just have to get dark enough in here. Yeah, even darker. So got to pull out that alizarin permanent with a little bit of black, and I'll be able to get that. Yep, that's where I needed it to go. Okay, better. So just as long as I have things in the right place and I feel confident about it, then I can be a lot more aggressive. Yeah. So have to carve into that iris a little bit again. And this is where having that little bit, although truth be told, it's not a very small brush that I'm using, it's just smaller than the other one that I was using. Okay, so you can see there I really got the accent, the white of the eye really popping out now. And so I have to get the other side of it just a little bit higher. That comes straight across the top. And then I get quite a bit of dark red for the tear duct area with the eyelashes coming across. Okay, great. So something not quite right about the nostril, the flange there. It's feeling a little bit too high or something. So this may take just the smallest amount of adjustment because it doesn't really look off. I think part of it is too, I have this highlight. It continues on straight in my painting and it bends a little bit in the photo. It's just little subtle things like that can really change the character of the face. And so it's worth paying attention to some of those things, making sure that they're right until they start to feel right. So start to feel like the right expression. Okay. So what I did just there is I started to come in with a brush and not enough paint on the brush, and I started just sort of wiping a little bit. I want to try to avoid that, getting that kind of fussiness going, because it really does weaken the painting at some point. And even though I just came in with a lot of paint and put it sort of in the wrong spot, then I can always come back in and carve a little bit, and it will make a much more interesting painting when you can see all that brushwork going back and forth. Really, how do I get that as orange as I want? So a little bit of the naphtha red, the permanent orange, and just a touch of black is going to give me the right colors here. I think so. And then it starts to fade a little bit. Okay, that's looking much better. And just reshaping this eye a little bit as it comes up higher. Okay, um, so my picture is still holding up. My battery is holding up. And let me see. And okay, and no new questions, so we're okay. I don't know why I just made those two strokes right there, but they're not what I wanted. Okay, so I just knocked them out. That's fine. Got a highlight on the chin here. That's the right color in an area that's not the right color. So it looks wrong even though it's right. So I will paint the colors that I know that I can see around it so that it starts to fit. Okay, and get some of this red coming across. Orange, red, grayer. So a little bit there. And truly gray right here. Then I'm going to reinforce those dark shadows right here. The dark comes down, out, lip. Okay, got a little more red in there. Okay, that looks a little bit better. I know it's not 100% perfect, but just as long as I'm getting progressively closer to where I want it to go. Okay, so I'm starting to struggle a little bit because I don't have enough white down on the palette. This is one of my worst habits, is that I'll continue to paint even though I don't have enough of one color or another. It's a little bit like printing with a color inkjet printer when you know you've completely run out of yellow, but you still keep printing, and you wonder why the color doesn't look right when it comes out. It's like, so finally you splurge and you, or you take the time and you put in the new toner, and then everything starts working the way it should. And it's sort of like that when you don't put the colors out on your palette, and then you try to reach that color, but without having the color, then it's a little bit problematic. Okay, now I can see, and I do this, and I know I should have tried to compensate for it, but I always bring the jaw line here a little bit too low, and it isn't that low. So getting that jawline right and dropping the chin down a little bit lower will help. Okay, so now it's just quite a bit of cleanup. If I can just look at where there's just a little bit too much brushiness that it's distracting, and I can just take some of that back a little bit, and let's redraw that a little and come up, soften this a little. So when I do that, some of the forms will start to come together a little bit better. And then I'm knocking back some of these transitions, but here is a transition that should be stronger right here in the corner of the eye. So I need to make a little bit of a sharper line with the brush stroke. Go a little bit darker there. That's better. Okay. So again, trying to pick out. And so sometimes I can clean up transition just by coming over it with a little bit of a softer brush. That's one way, but there's a risk of getting everything too blendy. This painting is not at risk of being that yet, but it can be. And I have a few paintings I've done recently where I've really have pushed that edge where there's just almost too much blending going on. And so a way to avoid that is that every time that you go to soften up a transition, you're actually coming in with a transitional color on your brush, and you're painting in that transitional color. So you're not really blending per se. What you're doing is um, you're coming in with another color between the two colors um, that are too contrasty. And by putting in that color in between, you're really creating a spot where the colors do blend together more naturally. Okay, and need a little bit of white just underneath that nostril, and then I probably need a little bit of an accent there, right along the bottom edge of that. That's too much, but fine. Put a little more white in underneath that nostril. And again, like I said, come in with the color instead of just blending. I think that in the end makes a much stronger painting. And need to open up the color on the tip of the nose a little bit. You know when you've done it right, when you really feel like you can see the form, like the illusion is starting to happen. Really love it when that happens. That you look at it, one moment it was just this flat bit of panel or canvas, and the next moment it's like it's really popping out of the surface. That's one of the reasons why I love to paint, that whole mystery of how that happens. That our brain can no longer see something as being flat, but it really just sees it coming out. I'm just going to start to indicate where her nose ring is just so that I can see those shapes a little bit better. And just put in a little bit of the dark shape there. There's going to be dabs of light paint on top of that, so I really don't have to do too much more with the dark. Okay, and I'm going to still straighten out her nose a little bit more. Does have a little bit of a light on that top edge, kind of purpley. There, I think that's the right color. Okay, so let's work on this far eye a little bit. Try to get it because it's kind of bugging me, and I really want to start to see it. And I don't think it's going to take that much because there's really not that much information there. It's just a few well placed areas of color. Finish off the shape of that eye. Now, this eyelid comes down a little bit. There's this very strong dividing line. Okay, and that light, it's really a purpley blue, but very fairly dark right here. I think that's too light. By the time I get the rest of the dark in there, though, let's try it again. Just knock it back a little bit. Okay, and then the bottom edge, top edge of the bottom lid, we can see coming across, so that helps to find where that bottom lid is. Let's see if I can get this eyelid as dark as iris as dark as it needs to be. Okay, and now a little treat. I am going to put the highlight in the eye. This is something I like to do kind of early on that allows me to kind of get the sense of the glossiness and the quality of light and the smoothness of the skin, sort of that surface quality that you don't get until you put that highlight in. Just, and another one right on the upper lid, just a touch. That's too light a touch. There we go. Okay. And then let me just correct the shape of that iris a little. Comes out just a little bit more. And where's that color? This just comes down, wraps down a little before it gets darker. So let's see if I can nail that line of the upper eyelid. So now I've just a little bit too much paint down there that it's not going down very easily, but there we go. And then the top of the cheek there just comes right up to the eye. Okay, so we got a little foreshortening going there with the shapes at the top of the cheek. Great. So, see some interesting calligraphic marks. I'm not sure I'm going to keep all of them, but I do want to keep some of them. Now, some of that um, in 19th century is realists speak is called bravura. Bravura is sort of this idea that sort of the machismo of the painter being made visible from the gestural brushstrokes that are visible. That's called bravura, and it's I want to keep some of that in the painting. I guess that's where I was going with that. I want to keep some of it. Okay. And I didn't make her eyelid quite as heavy as it needs to be. meaning how much it is coming in over the iris there. That's a little bit better. And let me see if I can get that very faint bluish highlight there, right here. Don't really have the pupil indicated in there, although I can see it in the photo. And that's coming in with a little bit of eye color, just right here will help make it feel more reflective. Okay, and there we go. That's starting to feel right. Okay, let's see if I can get the mouth working right here, because that's not quite happening yet. Again, I don't want to get too much in the weeds with little strokes, just really want something that represents a few strokes to represent the mouth. So, got to get back to one of my bigger brushes to do that. If I can just like get the chisel that few shapes that are there to get them right in value, placement, and color, then it all will come together pretty quickly. That's a little bit better. Okay, how are we doing here? So I'm about an hour and a half in. This is shaping up nicely. I would say about an hour altogether. I can really um, get this pretty close to being finished, if not finished. So I'm just going to keep on going. I have the energy. I have the audience, all 7 of you or 6 of you. And I maybe some will keep on joining if I keep on going. Last week I had about 13 or 14 people here at some point, and that was after painting for a couple hours, so that was pretty interesting. I just decided to keep on going. Well, I was going to stop, but then everyone begged me to keep on going, so I did. Aren't I a nice guy? Okay. So, want to keep that hair very loose, very gestural, but I also do want to get some the interesting colors in the background. Now, I didn't plan it out very well because her shirt really is much more blue violet here, and then there's this interesting color in the background which is greener. And I would have liked to, and I still can, would like to have this color up here and then this go bluer. So maybe I will start to do that. That's just really that minty white color is just that phthalo emerald and white mixed together. It's not a hard color to mix. There's the shape of the planter there that's adding a little interest just because of the tension between the contour of her hair and the contour of the pot. This doesn't have to be exact. It's not like the anatomy of the face where it feels really wrong if it's not right. Just throwing it in there. I know that something's off because I have the tabletop should be coming across the where the earlobe is. I just don't think I have the earlobe low enough, so I'm just going to correct that real quick. If you can bear with me here. Oh, earlobe, something more like that. And jaw, line, hair. Okay. Then I can have a little bit more shadow coming down here. Okay, you guys got really quiet. I know you're there, um, watching. Again, if you want to know anything about my process, about my colors, about how to grow your channel on Instagram, about how to sell your work, which I'm not completely an expert in, but been doing a little bit better lately, getting portrait commissions, and been also looking and doing online courses, but I started to see how much money and effort it was going to involve to do that, and then again take away from my painting time. So have to really give that one a um, real hard look to decide if that's what I want to do. So a little bit of white in here. That's good. And again, some in here. And really want to get that that sense of shape of her throat and the reflected light that's coming off of it, or the highlights, I should say. Always shouldn't. I sometimes mix those terms, and they're really not the same. Highlights are usually the light side of the form where the light is reflecting off of it, and reflected light usually is in the shadow area of the face where there's a secondary light bouncing into the shadow. Let's see if I can get that green that I've been looking at. It's almost like a green orange. I think this is the color. Yep, that is the color. Let's get that little bit of uh, tendons there that are in tension. It's kind of in the wrong place. Got to move this over here. There. And then bring the light in. Okay. Okay, so the next starting to feel a little more convincing. I have the shadow from her earring here. That is that same sort of greenish color that's happening there, but darker. A little darker even. There we go. Okay, that's looking not quite right yet. Shadow is actually much straighter like that. Okay, that's not too bad. Let's see if I can clean that up a little. Good. And then her actual earring, I'm just going to again just put in the dark where I see the earring. Circle, bead, bead. Okay, something like that. And then when I put the highlights in, that's when it's going to feel like something. Okay. I know I say okay a lot. Just I'm looking again, trying to see where things are off by the greatest amount. Okay, that ear is starting to feel a little more convincing, which I like it. It's still loose, but I can kind of see what's going on there. Okay, let's leave that ear the way it is for now, and see if I can get some of these other things going. that's feeling good. So the most light in her face is right here along the side of her jaw. So I want to come in here with quite a bit of white and really lighten up this area, keeping the shape, those contours that I've drawn out. Okay, there's a little bit of red coming into the jaw area here. Means that I just went a little bit too far the other way in some of this area. Okay, and then soften this up a bit. Okay, gotta get this transitional shadows on the chin. This is what's going to make it really turn in space if I get this right. Okay, some of the redness of the cheeks I need a little more of. Okay, so Jennifer's here. Hi. Hey AJ, watching from Ontario, Canada. That's so much for, thanks so much for the information you share. I find it has helped me improve my own work. Would love to take your course, but understand if you decide not to. Yeah, I'm still trying to work that one out. Randy, I don't see you using any mediums here. Um, are you using mediums? How do you keep your paints from getting greasy and build up that that seems to happen to me if I keep on going and not let it dry? Um, yeah, I'm not sure I'm really having any issue with it being greasy. It's still, there's paint on the surface and it's paint that I'm painting continually to paint into, and I kind of depend on it being a little bit wet and having enough paint there to on the surface to work into. So maybe it's a matter of what you're trying to do. If you're trying to put in some fine details on top of something where there's a whole lot of paint down initially, then you're going to have a hard time um, controlling the paint on top of that. If so, it's a matter of knowing um, and not putting down too much paint in certain areas where you do want to come back and put in quite a bit of detail. And so you just really have to be careful there. In my case, I have to be careful not to put too much white in the paint where it's going to end up being a shadow area, because that's kind of hard to overcome that white and get it as nice and clean as you might want. Okay, let me see. We're still moving along. Just trying to get the right value here on the line of the chin. It's taking a few tries to get it right. Here I also want to clean up my transitions here in the between the chin and those soft forms around the mouth. It's just a matter of working back and forth, getting it right. Got a bit of white on the, yeah, so I really do have to continue to work on those lips there. Don't quite have it right yet. And go a little darker and redder here. Great, that's looking good. And then get a little bit of purple coming in right here in the corner of the mouth. Come in with a lighter pink. Up here, there's a little bit of a shape there. And then this middle shape in the lips. Oh, that can be drawn down a little. So if I come in with almost pure white to create the highlight here, that's a little bit too strong. So I'm going to try to mix it a little. Okay, so now those lips are starting to, they're not perfect, they don't have to be, but they're starting to describe the form pretty well. And again, reinforcing and restating those shapes on the philtrum of the nose. Just little subtleties too. Just the shape of this shadow here tells so much about how those forms are moving and pointing. Okay, let me see. No new questions, so I'm going to just keep on going. Okay, so this is where I started doing a lot of squinting, a lot of adjusting. So I can see this shadow here, if I look at it, hits right the middle area of the chin. So it's really over a little bit. And then I have a little bit of hair that's coming in over that. And then there's quite a bit more shadow right here. This is coming down a little straighter. And then you can feel the tension in the neck right, right here, or a little bit in her chest. It's a little bit, it feels like there's a little bit of pull there. I'm going to indicate her chain necklace just so I know where it is for later. Comes right off her chin, comes down. There's a locket there. Then in her neck. So something like that. That's kind of a good first attempt. I am going to shift her shirt to be a little bluer. Oh, I think I actually have to add a little purple to get there. Yep. Okay. So why don't you guys tell me a little bit about yourselves, whether um, you're looking to paint professionally or you're just doing it as a hobby, and or maybe you're in school learning art. I'm kind of interested to know where you guys are in the whole scheme of things. I I can tell you a little bit about me and where I am. I'm at some point in the past I was trying to be a full-time painter, but was never really making enough money to make that transition. Was not loving my job at the time, so I was sort of in this kind of frustrating sort of transitional area where I wasn't able to make a living off my art, but still at the same time really wanted to, just to leave my job and be doing that. Now currently I like the work that I do, my day job. So I am painting professionally, but more as my side gig, and finding that social media has become very instrumental in that regard, because otherwise I would be depending on the gallery system to get my work seen, and that has been an avenue that I just didn't really care for that much. So I'm glad there's an alternative to that. Okay, she's feeling a little cross-eyed, so it's just tiny tweaks in the position of her pupils that would position of her irises that just need to be moved just slightly. It's just a very subtle thing. Our brains know in a second when something's not in the right place. It just, that right place could just be the tiniest millimeter off, and your brain just knows immediately. It's just not feeling. It feels like she's looking down over her nose here, but the way I have it painted, it's not quite feeling that way yet. It feels like she's looking off forward, so gotta make a little bit of a change there. I think it's just having the whites come up a little bit further over. Not that far over. It's just because I didn't have enough control over what I was doing. Okay. That is, I think it's where I have the pupil painted that's throwing me off here. So I just need to get a little bit of the greenish color on the outside. Her eyes are a little bit more mocha, orangey brown color. So let's see if I can get. No, that's too light. I almost need to go black here. Okay, that's not too bad. That white there is just, it's way too strong, so I'm gonna come back in with a much darker gray. Okay, not too bad. Let's define these eyelashes a little, eyebrow a little bit better. Okay, you guys are still very quiet, that's fine. So there's a little bit of a purple and grays along the edge of her forehead, and that's really helping to turn the form. I can also, instead of painting it directly, all those small transitions, I can just make the edge much softer, and that would also accomplish close to the same thing. Okay, let's carve this a little bit more. Put the pupil here, in the middle. Just give her a touch, a little bit, touch more of iris. Okay, that's pretty good. See if I can get some of these highlights in the eye shadow, or her eyelid. Oops, what did I just do? Okay, that's fine. Another happy accident there. I needed a little more white. Okay, not too bad. Just need to make that eyelid just a tad narrower. Not the right color. Okay. Let's see if I can get that dark red orange going a little bit more in there. Okay, not too bad. Okay, so a few of you are still here with me. I'm going to keep on going for a little while, maybe till 11 or 11:30. Let's just see how this is holding up. Um, Maybe if I go long enough, some of those European subscribers of mine will start waking up and check their email and see that I'm doing a live demo and will join us. But I think I have to go quite a bit later before that happens. There's about a 6 or 7 hour time difference in some of the European Union countries and the Middle East countries. So anyway, okay. So want this. I want the green over here too. That whitish green, just a little bit here as a accent, and then I'm gonna copy what the photo's doing. There's a bit of a dark here that comes in. Okay, let's see. Just didn't give her enough on the base of her nose. Just gonna make that a little bit whiter. So it looks a little fussy. So let's see if I can come in with a little bit thicker paint. Okay, that's not too bad. Oh. Okay, just comparing, squinting, looking back and forth. So I have to be somewhat faithful to the values that I see up there if I want to get the feeling that the light and the forms are doing um, what they're doing in the photo. So a fair amount of copying, being true to the resource. I can be inventive in other ways, but in terms of getting these forms to read, I have to be fairly faithful, or I have to turn around and start to stylize a bit to get it. So stylizing is you're not really copying the photo at some point, you're just um, for some people it's sort of a visual language that they've created that they'll always come in and they'll paint the nose a certain way, or they'll paint a chin or something a certain way, and so all they need is kind of the position and some basic information about the lighting from the resource, and then they can just go to town. Okay, you need a clean pink right now. There. Okay, so I don't know if I'm really that good at the anatomy of the face, like where all the muscles and the bones are, but after painting a certain number of portraits, you begin to see the same patterns, the same shapes come up over and over again. And one of them for me is this little triangle that you see at the top of the cheek. Um, I just know to look for it because I see it so often. And then once I put it in, it just feels just right. Up, my picture froze up. Yep, that's me. If you can still hear me, let's see what I can do about that. Um, Sometimes it's getting my Wi-Fi to restart. Nope, nope, I lost it. Oh well.